Have you ever wondered what it feels like when instant karma strikes? Have you ever witnessed the moment when someone's arrogance collapses under the weight of their own words? This is one of those moments, when the WNBA had to show up and finally hold one of its stars accountable after a shameful outburst against the bright new face of the league. This is the story of how a seasoned veteran's contract suspension delivered poetic justice and why it matters far more than just one game.
Not sure if that was actually a foul, but again, that's for the ticky-tack fouls.
The fourth quarter of an intense matchup brought everything into sharp relief. Brittney Griner, a seasoned center with years of experience, found herself on the wrong end of a foul that knocked her out of the match. That moment, however, wasn't just about the physical play, it was the spark for something far uglier. She leaned into the camera during a heated exchange with Caitlin Clark, and suddenly the stadium silence felt louder. Viewers at home leaned in and lips moved, and just like that, the undeniable words slipped out. Trash white girl. The phrase hit with the force of a blow. Not just on the court, but off it, in the cultural and moral landscape that women's basketball now occupy.
Fever dog! Woo! Woo! Fever! Good dog.
What followed was the kind of silence that feels offensive in itself. The WNBA had seen worse controversies before. It had defended Griner through geopolitical drama, international legal battles, and wide public scrutiny. Yet here was video of her spewing racist abuse at the league's breakout rookie sensation the world watched as it seemed like nothing would happen. That silence became louder than any shouted apology. Karma, however, does not respect silence.
Ugly, but we found a way to win. Woo.
It's huge, and again, our depth and our ability.
Fans and analysts watched in disbelief as contradictory priorities played out. The league had launched full prosecutions into faint slurs from crowd members, yet seemed to turn a blind eye to a star player's clear racial aggression. Those same leaders expelled minor offenders while offering nothing but ambiguous statements in defense of a national embarrassment. It was a lesson in hypocrisy. Griner had once been the underdog, the underappreciated phenom. She had overcome obstacles abroad, had been retrieved in a prisoner swap, and rehabilitated into a beloved veteran who carried both status and rights in her locker room. But as her outburst showed, not everyone uses status for good.
To play different lineups, our ability to lift one another up if we don't have it. I thought...
An investigation came weeks later. Not because the league cared, but because the backlash became too loud to ignore. Video experts were called in. Multiple observers confirmed what seemed obvious. Griner had spit venom at Clark, calling her a racial slur toward white people. The footage left no room for doubt. The phrase echoed on social media. The WNBA's corporate sponsors, already alarmed, sensed a crisis. They saw profits slipping, brand identity tarnished. The league finally responded with force, pulling out the clause buried deep in its contracts. Brittney Griner, suspended indefinitely, hit with every penalty the league had in its arsenal.
By Autumn Johnson.
BG, right now you have 10 points, 5 rebounds. We see the Atlanta Dream as being very...
No more salary. No more locker room access. No more publicity tours. The suspension hammered at her endorsements too. Companies that once saw her as an icon evaporated, distancing themselves from scandal like moths from flame. The contracts that once lined her bank account met the harsh winds of cancellation clauses. The bitterness of that contract freeze burned with more intensity than any on-court defeat.
Right now she's talking to the refs about holding.
The timing couldn't have been worse. It came just as Caitlin Clark was turning the league into a media sensation. Lottery tickets sold, courts sold out, TV ratings soared. The contrast between rising star and fading veteran had never been starker, and sponsors weren't lining up to support a brand fighting with its own players. It was clear that protecting a big name came at too high a cost. Protecting Griner meant poisoning the narrative with racism, and that was a cost they could no longer pretend didn't exist. Teammates and allies tried to defend her. They painted the suspension as unfair. They said it was a rush to judgment. They tried to blame blurred lip readings. But no amount of spin could cover it. The video existed, the audio existed, the testimony existed, headlines were written, clips were shared. Even casual fans who discovered the WNBA through Clark couldn't stand the hypocrisy anymore. Support for accountability turned into a roar. Some critics, especially from one political corner, indignantly declared the whole episode a leftist witch hunt. They said supporters of racial justice had finally found their public enemy, and they seized it with every bit of glee. Ironically, their pushback only reinforced the original outrage. The contrast between teaching anti-racism and condoning racist attacks became too obvious. The league's silence, once accused of bias, now stood condemned as complicity.
Brittney Griner was caught on tape during a game with the Indiana Fever, dropping racial slurs against Caitlin Clark, pretty obviously doing so.
Accountability doesn't just serve abstract justice, it carries real-world consequences. For Griner, it meant a tarnished legacy. The same spirit that had recovered her from a Russian prison ended up stranded on a court that she had helped forge. What once felt like protection became shackles. Sponsors dropped her, teams reevaluated their loyalty. She became a case study in how entitlement can lead to ruin. It was a humbling, brutal fall. Caitlin Clark, meanwhile, found relief in the ruling. Her supporters cheered. Loyalty and fairness are part of her story, and seeing the league finally act offered reassurance. She didn't seek this silence or punishment, but she definitely benefited from the outcome. A league that showed it would stand behind truth and integrity. This suspension mattered far beyond one athlete. It represented a turning point for the WNBA. Up until that moment, its values, especially about race, had seemed superficial. Rules existed, but they were symbolic. Now, accountability became enforceable. The league was forced to reconcile that its public statements about inclusion meant nothing unless backed by real consequences. It was a hard lesson learned on center court.
That we were talking about earlier today.
And it doesn't take a lot of genius to...
That lesson extended to other players too. Veteran stars who thought themselves untouchable suddenly woke to a new reality. No more whisper deals, no more opaque settlements. Actions mattered now like they never had. The message was clear. Racist conduct will no longer be hidden in locker rooms or paid off with silence. The status quo had shifted. In high-level boardrooms, negotiations about TV rights and sponsorships saw new urgency. No league could consider itself untouchable when one player could shatter its image in seconds. The value of brand safety skyrocketed. Broadcasters made it clear. Accountability demanded transparency. No more apologies whispered after cameras shut off. Players now had contract language breathing beside them, outlining zero tolerance and immediate enforcement. But with such clear video evidence and explicit clauses allowing suspension for conduct detrimental to the league, any lawsuit would be hard to win. It would be costly, adversarial, a public justification for a racist episode, one more mistake that could ruin any chance at reconsideration.
lip read Brittney Griner, whose voice, by the way, is about as low as mine is, calling her trash and an effing white girl. Now, of course, if Caitlin Clark had...
This incident reverberated internationally as well. Basketball federations around the world took notice. Accepting or condoning racism in sports under the guise of star power was no longer viable. American leagues were expected to lead by example or risk global censure. The WNBA, forced to act, became a case study in accountability, not because it had choice, but because the stakes had become too great. Inside locker rooms too, culture shifted. Coaches who once spun defenses around PR statements now had new guidance. They addressed conduct directly. Agents found themselves rewriting clauses about behavior. Contracts now included rehab, education, community service, all preconditions for any return. Suspension wasn't a rumor, it was now a certitude. Even fans felt the change. Some returned to courts, hopeful the league would stand for something real. Others remained skeptical, watching closely to see if this was a one-time safeguard or a lasting policy. Only time would tell, but the moment set a standard. What about Griner herself? She found herself isolated. The bubble of entitlement ruptured. No locker room withdrew its microphone. She faced the very system she once protected her status through. The hush of a suspended contract speaks volumes. It robs you not only of income, but of influence, attention, and relevance. Some say this might be the end of her career. At best, it will be a long public climb.
Brittney Griner is playing a game, and this is what Brittney Griner calls. I was not going to comment on any of this stuff until this took place.
Culturally, this incident circles back to the core of modern sports narratives. Athletes are more than performers. They are public figures, role models, brand assets. Their words shape more than just Saturday nights. They shape social discourse, influence millions. When they fail, it reverberates far beyond the margin of defeat. Accountability becomes collective, immediate, necessary. When history looks back, this moment may be seen as one of transformation. A culture that once hid racist behavior behind star power decided it could no longer pretend neutrality equaled progress. A league realized that core values are not slogans but enforceable commitments. A star athlete learned that glory does not come with a pass on character. Instant karma doesn't just smack you in private, it gets replayed, dissected, debated. It disrupts assumptions. It forces conversations. It sweeps through locker rooms and boardrooms. It tears down brands and reveals truths. No one deserves silence when they use their platform to degrade others. No league deserves loyalty when it shields racist behavior. And no fan deserves a trophy when it is earned with hate, even if hidden behind a jersey.
Says the entire internet has reacted to this. Here's Brittney Griner. They're playing against the Indiana Fever.
When Brittney Griner leaned into that camera and spat hatred, she lit a fuse. The WNBA had a choice: defend her or condemn her. It took weeks, but in the end, contract suspension was the message. Instant karma hit. And it hit hard. That 4-month period of silence and confusion forced accountability. Something women's sports need more of, not less. And while the league's move came late, it came at a moment when clarity could. Caitlin Clark's rise demanded a response that matched the scale of her emergence. Griner's contract suspension delivered it.
And look what she's saying. Go ahead, Rob.
For the ticky-tack fouls that we were talking about earlier today.
The question now is not whether accountability is possible, it is whether it is permanent. If this moment becomes the standard, the WNBA could transform into a league defined not just by athleticism, but by integrity. But if it remains a single dramatic exception, then it will ring hollow, the sound of too little too late. Still, for one brutal instant, justice arrived. Karma had its mic, and it refused to stay quiet. It spoke through contract clauses, withheld salary, lost sponsorships, canceled appearances. It spoke through silence at press conferences. It spoke through emptied seats and declined endorsements. And maybe, just maybe, it will echo through locker rooms for years to come. If you'd like to see more breakdowns of sports culture, drama, hot moments, and trending accountability, click subscribe, like the video, and let me know what you think in the comments below.